Do you remember growing your first $900 tomato and thinking, gosh, if I just had gone to the grocery store, it would have been way cheaper? Yeah, same. But we are not doing that anymore. Welcome to the Food, Farm, and Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Graff, and together we are going to build our farms, homesteads, and gardens without destroying our finances. So let's get that bag of soil and money. Welcome back to another episode of the Food, Farm, and Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Graff, and together we are making farming and gardening more affordable and accessible for everyone, while we also build up our savings accounts and build towards those financial goals. And if you are so sick of trying to spend loads of money growing your garden and then still having to go to the grocery store and spend loads of money buying groceries, then this is the podcast for you. I hope you'll like, subscribe, and share with a friend who could also use this, because we are going to make change with this podcast, and you are at the right place and in good company. And today's episode is riveting, totally tubular, and totally rad. We are talking about the top 5 highest yielding per square foot vegetables you can grow in your garden. So this episode is excellent for people who are struggling with space. If you don't have much space, you can still grow tons of food, and I'm going to tell you exactly what to grow so that you can do that. But before all that, we need a little quick message from our sponsors. Today we have a real sponsor. Yeah, absolutely. It's still me, but I'm a real sponsor. Sponsoring it with Duck River Apothecary. That is our herbal tea business. If you would like to support this podcast, the easy peasiest way to do that is to order some of our cozy, delicious teas. They are designed to be both flavorful, but also incredibly good and impactful on your body. So with the cold weather settling in, it's never been a better time to enjoy a few of our teas. Or if you don't like tea, consider gifting it to somebody. Either way, we ship all across the United States. It's duckriverapothecary.com, and we would love for you to try some of our teas. Now back to the episode. All right, the top 5 highest yielding vegetables per square foot. And if you are really nice to me, I might just do a 6th bonus one at the very end of this episode. But I don't want to give out spoilers. It's a really good one. But number 1, oh wait, no, we're not doing number 1. We are doing number 5, because we are going to build the anticipation up for you. So we are going to go from number 5 all the way to the highest yielding, but coming in at a good old fashioned number 5, this one's going to be shocking. Absolutely surprising. Summer squash. Now that's going to include things like yellow squash and our bestie zucchini. Now, if you have ever grown a zucchini before, you know that these guys are just like, bam! I am a zucchini and I am here, and you have zucchini now. I think that's like, if you live in a rural area where people tend to garden, everyone's overrun with zucchinis at a certain point in summer and spring, and we're all just trying to give zucchinis to each other, but nobody really wants them or needs them because we have so many zucchinis. So a zucchini plant, or a summer squash plant, I should say, can produce 7.2 pounds of produce per square foot. That's really, really solid. 7.2 pounds is a lot. So when comparing that to something like pumpkins, which are another squash plant that is highly sprawling, it comes in at 1.9 pounds per square foot. So a summer squash is going to be a lot higher yielding, and that's probably because that turnaround on those squash, like, we just get tons and tons and tons of squash coming because the plant just pumps it out. Now, what do you do with all of this squash, and why would it actually be worth growing if I'm saying that nobody can possibly eat the amount of squash that squash plants put off? Well, you can absolutely freeze it. I definitely do. Or my favorite thing to do with zucchini particularly is I like to grate it down, and I will make massive batches of zucchini bread and zucchini muffins, and I will eat on that for literal like months and months and months. I put it in the freezer, and I am like your crusty old great Grammy that pulls out a really freezer burnt loaf of like sweet bread that she like, come on honey, like eat some of this, and you're just like trying to muster your way through it. I am your sweet little Grammy here because I will be pulling out that zucchini bread year round when zucchini has been long gone. But it's a great way to use it up, and it's truly a wonderful, wonderful crop. I've even seen a lot of people now growing these vertically where they just like kind of grow them straight up, creating even higher yields and even smaller footprints. So you can definitely play around with that. But coming in at number 5 is good old-fashioned summer squash. Now, number 4 is one that is my favorite, and I tell people about this all the time. I think it's the most underrated vegetable in the garden. Why don't people grow this vegetable anymore? I just do not understand. People are like, no, we're not doing that. And I'm like, you're a snob because they're delicious and you need to believe that they can be a great source of food for you in your garden, okay? It's kind of like potatoes, except not. Coming in at number 4 and 7.4 pounds per square foot, we've got turnip greens. Turnips for roots and greens. Not just turnip greens, turnips for the roots and the greens. Now, turnips are very similar to potatoes. What I love about turnips is you can use the roots just like potatoes. I boil them down and I make mashed turnips, and let me tell you, they are insanely delicious. And turnips can store pretty well in like a cellar situation for a couple of months, but you could also freeze turnips, store them in the fridge for a couple of weeks. So turnips are a really, really great item. Not only can you eat the roots, but you can eat the greens. Hello, turnip greens. I'm not saying that Southerners were onto something, but Southerners were onto something, right? Not only can you eat the roots, but the entire time that those roots are growing, you can chow down on those greens. And then you end up with producing food beneath the soil line and above the soil line, which is really, really contributing to that high poundage yield. And what's not being factored in here is just how quickly turnips grow. So they will grow really quickly, meaning it's really, really easy to boop another set. So a whole nother succession in the same spot to grow, shocker, but more turnips, all right? The amount of turnips you can grow in a small bed, you are gonna get sick of turnips. And also, there's this cute little thing where people carve turnips, like they let the turnip get really big and they carve them for Halloween. And I think that is just too stinking adorable. And traditionally, I guess turnips and potatoes were what were carved as jack-o'-lanterns. So I'm obsessed with that, and that has nothing to do with yield, but I'm always gonna have turnips in my garden. Now, coming in at number 3 is leaf lettuce. I told myself I would stop singing my words in my podcast, and clearly I have not. So I have not grown in any way, shape, or form, even though I'm several podcast episodes deep now. I'm gonna tell you some stuff about leaf lettuce. Look at that, that's on growth. I didn't sing it that time. So leaf lettuce on average can produce 7.4 pounds per square foot. So the same as turnip greens. I think though, lettuce is a little more, when I think lettuce, okay? So while that is a huge yield, if you were to eat 7.4 pounds of lettuce, you might get unwell. Like, I don't mean it in a bad way, but like, do you really need that much fiber? I don't know. So lettuce is great, but I think some of the preservation methods are pretty much non-existent. So if you have preservation methods for lettuce, by all means share them. I think lettuce is best grown in smaller amounts and smaller quantities and utilized fresh and planted in multiple successions. But the point I am making is that a lot of lettuce can be grown for just one little square foot in the garden. So lettuce is a really, really great option. I even did an entire episode on lettuce. So basically the average family of 4 is putting down like 50 pounds of lettuce a year, which means you really wouldn't have to have that many square feet to grow loads of lettuce. You're talking about 6 to 7 square feet to hit an entire year supply worth of lettuce for your family of 4. That is really insane when you really think about it. So lettuce is a great one. I'm a huge lettuce advocate. I think everyone should be growing lettuce at home on their own for sure. But it's just not my favorite because I don't think the storage methods are there. So producing these high volumes is great in theory, but in terms of like execution of like, what am I going to do? You might end up having a lot of waste if you grow just a little too much. But of course, you can always sell that excess or give it away. There's nothing wrong with a bit of generosity. So coming in at number 2, this one surprised me. And I don't even know what to really say about this one. Because, to be frank, I don't really do this. Coming in at number 2 at 8.2 pounds is bunching onions. Are we serious right now? I don't even know what to say about that. Like, I don't even grow bunching onions. I mean, I know a lot of people do. Every year I think about it because I'm like, maybe I should grow bunching onions. But then I'm like, who really needs to grow bunching onions? I do use them all the time in my kitchen, but I don't grow too many of them. So maybe that's an area that I should be improving upon because it's really, really simple to grow bunching onions. I will say the only bunching onions that I really grow are the ones like I will buy them from the store and then I will cut them and then I will let them re-sprout in a jar on my countertop. For a whole podcast about gardening, frankly, this is bleak and embarrassing, but that's what I do and I tend to buy the bunching onions. I'm not gonna lie. But reading this, I'm officially inspired to grow my own bunching onions because I'm gonna produce 8.2 pounds of bunching onions in a 1 square foot area. That is actually wild amounts. So that is coming in high on the list as the second highest yielding crop. And the thing that's really amazing about bunching onions is A, they grow in some cooler weather, which is nice because you can extend your season. But B, you can pretty much use them in anything. So you can chop them up. I mean, I put onion in everything. And you can pretty much use bunching onions like you would onions. So I think it's a really great option. Again, this is a do as I say, not as I do podcast because let me tell you, I am not growing my own bunching onions. But after seeing this, I will be. And the big old number 1. This one is going to come probably at no surprise to anyone. I read this and I was like, oh, shocker. But the thing is, it might just be one of the most powerful ones on the list in my opinion. So tomatoes grown on supports, growing vertically. So we're growing up with the tomatoes. On average, 1 square foot can produce 9 pounds of produce. That's a ton of produce. And I think what makes tomatoes a really rad, totally tubular option for people growing in small spaces is they can grow them up. And then if you're looking to offset your grocery bill, if you're looking to start producing more of your own food, tomatoes are a great base. You can make spaghetti sauce, you can make salsas, you can make just canned tomatoes. There are so many items that are staple pantry items that tomatoes serve as a base for. So if you're only going to grow one thing on this entire list, I would highly recommend it being tomatoes, which is why it's kind of like the pinnacle of gardening success is, do you grow great tomatoes? If you do grow great tomatoes, you are a great gardener, yada, 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 yada. But tomatoes is coming in at number 1. I really want to know if you were surprised by number 1, if there was other options that you thought might be there. I personally was incredibly surprised that pumpkins only produce 1.9 pounds per square foot on average because, you know, you look at pumpkins and some pumpkins can be absolutely gigantic. And I think of pumpkins as a really great way to produce food for a family because they store really well. They produce lots of food. And the fact is, on a square foot level, they really don't produce that much if you are struggling with space. Now, I did promise. I promised one more if you hung out with me through the episode. And this one is coming in at number 6 in terms of yield per square foot. But I think this might just be the most important one on the list right next door to tomatoes. And this is bulb onions for storage, y'all. That's right. So if you can grow your own bulb onions, you can produce a whopping 6.9 pounds of onion per square foot. I think that's incredibly powerful. Onions are a staple item in pretty much every household, and you can add them to everything. And what's amazing about these onions is you can store them. You can just store them like is in a root cellar type situation in a cool, dark place. You don't have to process them, and you can have onions pretty much as long as you need. So I think that is a really, really cool one, and I do grow onions. I don't grow bunching onions, but that's probably because I grow bulb onions, and I also grow these really fun things that are called walking onions, but that's a whole nother episode. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope if you have really small square footage in your garden that this will help you narrow down the top 5 highest yielding vegetables that you can grow in your garden. I did not do the top 5 lowest performing vegetables, but of course I did throw pumpkins right under the bus for some reason. But maybe we'll do an episode on the top 5 lowest yielding vegetables in the garden. But either way, I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure, like the show, leave us a review. We really need some feedback here. Let us know how we're doing it and share with some friends, some family. Tell the world about us because we want to help make the world a stronger, better place, build up our community. So until next time, I'll see you guys.